Tapestry weaves together the threads of our struggles and doubts, curiosities, our faith, our joys and hopes to create meaningful conversations that matter. You know those late night conversations that go unexpectedly deep? That's what we want to capture with the Tapestry podcast. And we want everyone to jump in the conversation. Because when we are heard and valued, we can begin to believe we are loved. Welcome to the Tapestry podcast. Hey everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Tapestry podcast. I'm here with my friends who will introduce themselves now.
I'm Haleigh.
Mwangi.
And my name is Mike. And we are talking about a question, what do I owe you? And it's kind of this idea of taking this transactional statement of maybe that somebody might say after, you give them something and they're like, well, what do I owe you for that? And writing it large, like what do we owe each other in society? What do we owe each other as humans? And we started by talking about this big question of society and what that means and what happens when our idea of who we have obligations to gets too small. And in this episode, we're going to talk about why we resist having any obligations at all, or why we have our smaller circles, why we gravitate towards smaller circles when having a bigger circle or seeing a bigger obligation to humanity can be so revolutionary. And we've seen examples of that in history with some of our greatest figures, some of the people we revere the most. So, I guess jumping in, what are you guys' thoughts on why is it that we don't like it? We don't like having obligations to other people.
It's hard, man. I mean, to your point, if I have obligations to 1 million people, that feels tough, right? Like, how do I measure my impact? If I have obligation to just the two of you, I can probably measure that impact every day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So unless I have the drive and sort of like this grand vision about what I want to do you have to be self-motivated to kind of push on. Otherwise, it's a lot easier to just like deal with a smaller crowd and see what you can influence there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What you feel about that, Haleigh?
I mean, I know last time I was saying like, yes, we owe everybody kindness, we owe everybody respect from the get. But that doesn't mean that I am obligated to 1 million people, that I have obligations to every human on the planet. I think it's very much like I have obligations to the people I meet or have, obligations to. But I think, to cut to it, I guess, the reason that we like resist obligations, capitalism is killing us, but I think partially one, like we have so many obligations just to survive, right, in a capitalistic society. And we're talking, just to, I guess, tie it back when we talk about what do we owe each other, and immediately goes transactional.
Mm-hmm.
Capitalistic mindset, in my mind, to me, right? But we have so many obligations just to ourselves just to survive, right? Mm-hmm. Like I work less than both of you. I know that. I'm going to have to work more to survive better later, right? Like, you
mean you work fewer hours than us?
Yeah, fewer hours.
You work hard.
Yes, less intense. I work hard, but less intense work.
Yeah.
Right, I'm not traveling every 2 weeks like Mwangi is.
Mm-hmm.
And I work 20 hours. Okay, that's not crazy. And I love my job, but it's also not incredibly sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So it works now. I don't know how long it's going to work out, but we'll extend that as far as we can, simply because an obligation of 40 hours, that is crushing to my soul. I'm not going to lie. Right?
It's double.
If you give me an but you give me an obligation of 40 hours, why would I want to give more time to more things, to more people? if I have to work 40 hours just to make rent, groceries, all of the things that I have to in order to live, that I have to give 40 hours every week, and I get 2 days of rest.
Yeah,
right? Like that's a big ask. And
you only have so much time, so much energy.
That's different, Mike. Though, like when you were growing up, was that a big ask for you, Mike? Or was that I mean, like the idea of, I mean, I think it's your point is really interesting, Haleigh, right? So, so Mike, I'm asking you, when you're growing up and somebody says, "Oh, you got to work 40 hours," like, is that radical to you when you're Haleigh's age at the time?
So I guess when I was at Haleigh's age, oh man, this is going to sound.
Back in my day.
I'm going my cane. Oh,
No, but I guess as I was starting out in ministry, so for those of you who haven't joined the podcast before or don't know much about me, I am the director of student ministries and this thing we call Tapestry here at that we're doing right here. So I work with middle school and high school students as kind of like the main thing that I do in a church setting. And I've been doing that since the late 90s. And when I first started doing it full time and I was tracking my hours, I realized that there were some weeks when I was working like 60 or 70 hours a week. And it was easy to do because partially because I was single. I didn't have a wife, let alone a girlfriend, didn't have all that many other kind of obligations, right? And so I could give so much of my extra time to these kids. And I was encouraged by mentors to set better boundaries. But sometimes, and it's still true now, like if I'm on a trip, like we're planning a trip to Ecuador. It's going to be amazing. I'm so excited, right? We're gonna be gone for 8 days, and what are my work hours for that week, right?
There aren't any.
Yeah. We're like, or what are my off hours? At best, I'm on call the whole time. So, I guess to answer your question, no, I didn't have this feeling that I only needed to work a certain number of hours or else I wouldn't have the other things. But I'm also super blessed to have found a job that also feels like a calling and a way of life. And so a lot of it doesn't feel like work. Like right now, my plan is on Friday, and we got a plan. I'm going to be taking a student who's never skied before. He's in 8th grade. And we're going to go skiing on Friday because he's off and I can take the time and we're going to spend probably 13 hours together that day, right? Is that a 13-hour workday for me? I guess so. But also I'm skiing and I'm teaching someone to ski. So I think it depends on what kind of work we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I feel like I talked a long time about that.
What about you, Mwangi?
No, I mean,
you were my age?
Yeah, no, I think it's it. Yeah, that's why I asked my first, thinking about maybe we talked about the local group, right? Maybe somebody says, oh, I your dad owns a sandwich shop. That's where you're going to work. You didn't even get to pick, right? That's what's just going to happen. And you saw them, to your point, Mike, maybe they're working 60 hours. So to you, 40 hours is kind of normal. Or something like that. I don't know if I've said this on this podcast before, Haleigh, but you remind me of somebody I used to work with. It was an intern, and she was working with me, and she called me out because she's like, well, she said, you work more than 40 hours, right? And it was just, I gave her access to my calendar, but she's like, we're 40 hours. Like, what are you talking about? So we were on trips, and she's like, well, to your point, Mike, right? You go on a trip, if you go on a work trip, especially if you go with teammates, you're up eating breakfast together, then you go do your work, then you're at dinner. So depending on your personality, you can feel like you're working for like 16 or 17 hours and you don't get that break. Now, some people love that. Some people not gonna. So her point was, when I work, I want to be paid based on the amount of time I am present. So if we go on a trip and I'm there with you all and obligated to be with you all for 16 hours, I should be paid that. If I or if we go to, if we do this other thing, and Mike, to your point, like, but if I'm also doing this, like, that's how it should be. So it's interesting to hear from her. She's your age, Haleigh, right? So I was like, damn, she checked me, like, legit, right? She just checked me. You're getting suckered. That was her point. Like, you're getting suckered. You're not, right? You're working more than, but Mike, in some sense, in some generations, that's a badge of honor. Right? It's a badge of honor to say, like, I put in my work hours, right? Yes, I'm getting paid this, but look how much time, I've put in there. So, like, coming back to the O thing, right? What does an employer owe you, and what do you do owe an employer when the employer is asking you to be loyal? What does that mean exactly? Does it mean that you can miss your birthday? Does it mean you can miss your spouse's birthday because you got to go to work? You got to go in, like. It may depend on what kind of profession you do. If you're a trauma surgeon, maybe, right? But even like physicians are going through their own kind of thing about young physicians not wanting that type of lifestyle. But what does that do to the profession? I'd like to add a different slant too on this obligatory thing too. In many immigrant communities, there's an obligation sometimes to things like work, where you may have parents who worked very hard and therefore now gave you this opportunity. You may owe that generation, not necessarily monetarily, but you owe them to show up to work.
Yeah.
You owe them not to complain about what you're saying, talking about, like, my boss sucks, and they're like, you have no idea, right? Just your boss, that's it. But they still pay you, like, who cares, right? So even this owing thing, again, depending on what we're talking about, can be translated in many different ways. Generationally, of course, culturally,
situationally,
right?
Yeah,
things,
culturally.
and things like that.
Yeah, and my neighborhood here in Denver is primarily Hispanic. And then a number of my neighbors are Asian, and then there's white folks too. And I only say that to say that, like, my neighborhood looks different than the neighborhoods around the church that I work at, which is more primarily kind of Anglo-white, middle class to upper middle class. And, like, it's just a different thing. And so I see that, like, this sense of, like, no, I'm going to go to school because no one in my family has gone to college.
Right.
And that's a different thing. Like, I'm blessed with that kind of generational educational wealth that, like, at least four generations back, I've got people who are either college students or professors, right? Like, way, way back, as far back as I know. And that is just not the case in many, many families and many communities. And I think that does speak to this idea of, in the United States, we have this feeling of, like, if you should work hard, and when you do, the benefits will come. All you have to do is put your mind to it, and it'll come. And for some people that works. It seems to me that no matter how hard some people work, I mean, like, and we're going to talk about billionaires in a future episode, like $1 billion is so big, you guys. Like, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. Like, it's so much money, right? And you just can't even earn it in a normal kind of way, right? So, this idea of bootstrapping, or, all you do is work hard, and that's, like, be a rugged individual, a cowboy in the mountains, be self-sufficient. And I think that informs, for a lot of us who grew up in that kind of, like, soup, that we end up focusing then also on individual rights and individual freedoms. And therefore we don't have, like, my only obligation is to make sure that, like, nobody violates my rights, and if they do, they get theirs, right? Or not their rights, but their whatever they deserve because they violated mine. And when I talk about freedom, I'm only really talking about my own individual freedoms, and that we don't owe anybody anything else. And I don't know if you guys have seen that or felt it.
It's fake, man. Like, part of it is fake because, okay, we need teachers in this society, right? And they're underpaid. So what's the solution? Every teacher should just quit? And, like, this is my point, right? Like, in a healthy society, if everybody's trying to become the billionaire you're talking about, Mike, that society doesn't exist. Right. And I'm not crapping out, like they're coming back to passion, right? We have a problem where we underpay teachers. They should be paid more. Those people are passionate in what they do. So what we should try to look in society is where the passion lies is where we should invest, right? That's where we should owe, right? We should put that money, right? We need mail. We have postal workers that should deliver mail. Nothing against them, but I'm just saying a society can't, billionaires hire people to do stuff. Once they get to billionaire status, they're just chilling. Other people are doing stuff for them.
Right.
Okay? So it's who's doing that and understanding. Again, it's not an owing. I'm not saying you have to pay your landscaper $1,000 an hour, but it's a recognition that in society we need these roles that help society thrive. And perhaps we owe those people we don't recognize or not be rewarding properly to be elevated, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it just ties back into what we talked last episode of who we put value into and what that means. Like, what the consequences of that are. I guess to tie back it, like, to go back to, like, our root question of why we resist obligation, right? To add some context to earlier conversation, too, of working 40 hours 30 years ago got you a lot more than working 40 hours does right now.
I think that's probably true, yes.
Yeah. So, like, the cost of living has gone up, but wages have not, essentially.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
In the same ratio.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, right now, like, those obligations are, it just feels more. Because I'm doing the same amount, possibly more. Well, I'm doing the same amount in time. But I'm going to have to do more to get to the same place.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like, I'm going to, like, it's not going to be as easy for me to buy a house.
Right.
That's just fact. But I think we also resist obligation because of I'm kind of switching gears here, but there isn't a lot of grace when people don't meet the requirement of the obligation.
Yeah, yeah.
So one example right now is a couple years ago, there's a band I love called Rainbow Kitten Surprise. And a couple years ago, they play at Red Rocks. They sell out Red Rocks like every summer.
I'm
2
looking
days
that
in a
up
row.
right now,
It's crazy. They're the best. But a couple years ago, they canceled their tour, kind of out of nowhere. It was like a couple months out from Red Rocks, getting super hype about it, and they canceled the whole tour. Everyone got refunded, right? But a common response I saw to this, like, the band was like, "Hey, we've been touring a long time. We took a break for mental health. We think we came back too quick. We need another break." Which I think, from someone who's been in music circles, that's so valid. And I think in any circle, that should be a
Super
valid
healthy,
reason,
yeah.
right? But there was this pretty, like, common response from fans that was like, "Well, I paid for a ticket, you owe me a show." But you got refunded the ticket. Like, you're not actually losing anything monetarily. I get the disappointment. I was disappointed. But, like, there is this level where it's like we refuse to see people, I guess this ties back to last episode, as human enough.
Yeah.
Right? You're in a band, man. You make music that I like. Right?
Yeah.
I gave you fame. I gave you this gig because I bought the ticket.
Yeah.
Right? And there was that kind of response, and I'm just sitting there like, that's crazy. That's an insane response to me. Like, I don't know how you can ignore someone being vulnerable enough to say, "Hey, this, like, touring is really hard." And you ignore that, but then you also add to the reason why touring is hard. Right? Because fans feel like that you owe them something. And that's even really interesting right now in that Gracie Abrams, I don't know if you guys know who that is.
Yeah.
She's another musical artist. Right now, her fans...
J.J. Abrams' daughter. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, huh?
Yeah.
Nepo baby. Anyway, irrelevant. But right now, there's a petition going on. Gracie Abrams fans are like notoriously annoying and toxic, to be honest. No offense, listeners. But as a fan base...
We love you. Yeah.
As a fan base on Twitter. But there's a petition going around to change the opening act of the tour because they don't know who it is. And one, those are people who can't even fathom spending $5 on a ticket to go to a bar to watch 5 bands you've never heard of.
Right, yeah.
But 2, people who are just so out of touch of, music culture, but also, like, that person got a gig that was probably going to change, like, is changing their life probably.
That's the point.
Right.
Yeah.
But they owe you what? A sing-along?
Right, yeah.
Like, I feel like we're changing, I think, like, we don't want to have obligations because people don't respond well when they don't go to plan.
Yeah.
Right now I'm getting, I wrote a comic book script for an anthology, like, literally 2 years ago. It's been in production for a long time because it's hard to get an artist. I'm currently getting ghosted by my comic book artist.
No, that's so annoying.
But there's this thing where it's like, I am trying to be as graceful as possible. Simply because this dude is my age. Working in art in creative industries is hard.
Yep.
And I've also been in that place where people are like, hey, you said you would do this thing. I've never done this for Tapestry ever. But like, hey, haven't heard from you. Could you respond? And I don't for a while, right? Mike knows nothing about that from me at all. But I've done that a lot. So like, I understand that feeling of overwhelm where things are just a lot. And it's like, this thing, I'm going to push that away for a second. And then it's hard to get back into it because there's embarrassment, right? There's a level of shame of like, oh, I didn't do what I said I was going to do. And not that I think, Mike, you're going to be mad at me or that like, usually people are generally pretty nice, but I think there's a level of fear and embarrassment and shame when we don't do what we say we're going to do. Simply because obligations have so much pressure attached right now because they're kind of rare to other people. Like, we don't give a whole lot of ourselves, so when we do, it's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I got. I rest my case.
So much.
There should be a button for that, by the way. Well, right, the whole button.
I rest my case.
Well, to your point, like, there should be a button where it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not dealing with this now, and everybody gets that, and you get out on
I do not disturb
like,
just for, like,
everybody gets
to
10
others.
buttons a year or something. And you can use it, and nobody gets to, like...
Like a ticket, like a...
Yeah, everybody's like, yep, okay.
You're good.
No, I get it. I've been there too, yeah. Mwangi, you got thoughts?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the O thing, right, Haleigh? So I think also in different societies, this idea of like, I said I'm going to do something, therefore I'm going to do it. So in some cultures, I kind of think about this. In some cultures, if I'm throwing a party and I say, Mike, show up at 4. In some cultures, at 6, right?
Yeah.
Right? In some cultures, at 7. In some cultures, if I say my party's going to go from 4 to 8, it's really 4 to like 3 a.m. So how that, maybe it's transactional, how that interaction happens also is based on how we know each other. In this society, if you say you will do something, capitalistic, it's transactional. If you don't do it, then we get mad at each other. In some societies, maybe like you're good, whatever, man. Like,
and maybe you
didn't get to do it, like whatever. But it can also flip the other way. Yeah. In some of those cultures, if you say like, like party starts at 4 and I come and nobody is there and you expect me to stay to 3 a.m. and my bedtime's at 10, now I get mad at you because you told me the wrong information.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, to your point, like, even, it can also depend on society. So it could be frustrating. It could be healthy in some sense. It could also be frustrating where like, okay, somebody's ghosting me or like, what's going on. Also, like, okay, I did this for you. You need to pay me on time. You need to reciprocate or something like that, or yada, 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 right? I think where we are, the owing and how much you owe can change. And then, but there's also us individuals, right? And as much as we live in a culture, we're also individuals and how we take those things. So we also need to like measure that too. And there's layers, right? You just explained something that has to do with work, Haleigh. Right? I am working on something. People take their money seriously, right? If you're working on a project and you're putting in hours, hopefully this thing gets sold and does well.
Right, yeah.
You're messing with my money. And you know, in America, you don't want to mess with nobody's money, right?
Yeah, which is very real in this
You know what I'm saying? Like,
It's a whole other thing.
it's a whole different thing when you're messing with people's money. People change.
Yeah.
I don't care how much you love them, people will change.
Family.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't matter how tight you are, money can mess things
Many
up.
can mess things up. And so coming back to the oath thing, right? You know, if an elder dies and somebody goes to a will reading, what is owed?
Yeah.
What is owed? Well, I'm owed this because blank. I am owed this because blank, right? Or you are not owed this because blank. Happens all the time, right?
Right.
In many,
I'm going to cut you out of the will because whatever.
cut you out the will, or like, you know, somebody gets a promotion, right? And you're like, well, you owe me. I've been here. Like, why don't I get that? No, why so and so? Like, and perhaps, you know, the part of the point, I think, Mike, you creating this question for this episode is maybe introspect and like looking at, okay, who do I feel owes me, and then how much hold do they have over me if I don't get what's owed to me, right? If I don't get what's owed to me, like, what happens, right? Do I explode? Do I shrink?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
And that creates avoidance, right? Like, why would I risk there's this, like, you know, I want to protect my peace, whatever. But like, that's a, kind of ties back to like, we don't owe each other anything because I want to protect my peace. It's like a young people thing at the moment. But very much like, but it is kind of real, right? Why would I risk my own well-being if I don't have to?
Yeah. I wrote down this thought that there's part of me that doesn't want to owe anyone anything. And I think that same part of me also doesn't want to be owed anything. I don't want anybody to owe me anything. Like, let's just like, we don't need to have anything to do with all this, right? Because it seems cleaner and simpler. But I guess part of the reason that I asked this question to begin with is it seems to me that kind of attitude or perspective, we lose something, right? There's something valuable to be gained from living in a society where we feel an obligation to each other. That's why we have been able to thrive as a species. It's why we are talking to each other over the internet through machines crafted by human hands, right? Like, we have to work together for those kinds of things, and it doesn't happen without that. But then there's also this tension, this like pushback against it. Like another question that I wrote down, like, what did you, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, like, there's just like a fear of being perceived. I think there's a like mass fear of vulnerability because it's scary. And a lot of people get, like, in the state of things right now, people get burned for being vulnerable. And so it automatically makes our defensives go up. Yet we are trying to be as connected as we can be, right? I think people, like, it's a common thing right now. People are as connected, like, we're more connected than we ever have been.
It's so polar, though.
How true is that?
COVID wasn't.
Right.
During COVID, it's all about being, like, it's so, like, 180. During COVID, it's like, like, everybody getting on webcams and being vulnerable about being at home, and everybody's like, we get it. And then now we're like,
5 years later, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, but I mean, even social media, almost my whole life, I had enough childhood without it, and then, you know, middle
Yeah.
school through now. What does it look like to be connected, but feel so lonely? And that's like, I think we had talked about that last season too.
Yeah, connection and isolation, like somehow.
And that
though
ties
we have
into
this ability. Yeah.
Yeah, it really ties into like what we feel we owe each other, because owing one another, whether that's a debt or like just like not a burdensome obligation, but maybe just like an automatic obligation, that warrants connection in the first place.
Yeah, there, what you're saying reminds me that there's some risk involved, right? There's something, I guess, heavy about it. And in the next section, I want to talk about that some more for sure. There was one other thought that I wrote down. It seems like that there are some people in the world who don't hesitate to like care for a person with special needs or has maybe something like they're going to need care for the rest of their lives.
Someone who needs assistance.
And someone who will just jump in and do that, no questions asked. But there are other people who would see that same person who has needs as a drain on society. And why is that? Why do we have such different reactions to potential obligations? I think it's something about us. And I think every major faith tradition, every spirituality speaks to that in us. And that's what I hope to talk about next. Talk about kind of where spirituality takes us, where whatever faith we're a part of, like how that affects how we see our obligations, or maybe how it should affect that, and kind of what some of these traditions have to say about what it means to live in society, what it means to be in connection and in relationship with each other. So I'm excited to talk about that with you guys.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Cool. So next episode, talking about spirituality. The Tapestry podcast is produced by Stephen Bailey. Original music was scored by Taylor Martin. Our hosts are Haleigh Bird, Mwangi Ndonga, and me, Mike Orr. Special thanks to Lauren Richmond Jr. and Resonate Media. You can learn more about Tapestry and join the conversation on our Discord channel at tapestrytalk.org. Thanks for joining us.